Hello, my name is Allyson Brooks and I'm president of the Thurston County League of Women Voters. Thank you for joining us today. And we are here for our forum, Superior Court Judge Position 4. We're here with Erik Price and Indu Thomas. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization dedicated to voter education and making informed voters, registering in voters, and getting you to vote. So these forums are particularly important. I want to remind you that the League of Women Voters is open to men and women, so we encourage you to join us and help us educate our voters. And with that, we're going to start. Each candidate will have a 2-minute opening statement, and we will start with Indu Thomas. Indu.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Indu Thomas, and I am a candidate for Superior Court Judge Position number 4. What distinguishes me is that I have worked for all 3 branches of government. I have enforced the law as an Assistant Attorney General. I have drafted the law as nonpartisan staff counsel, and I have applied the law as a Superior Court Commissioner for the last 5 years, hearing cases in family and juvenile court. These characteristics are really what this county needs at this time. Of the 8 judges who appointed me to be commissioner 5 years ago, 5 of them are going to retire or be retired by the end of this year. Each of them had more than 20 years experience on the bench. I was trained by those individuals. I have made the transition to the bench. I would be privileged to take that work that I have done as a Superior Court Commissioner to a higher level as a Superior Court Judge. I would be honored to have your vote and support.
Thank you. Erik.
Hi, my name is Erik Price, and I'm running for Position 4 because I have the right type of experience for this position. For almost 20 years, I have been in the courtroom representing people, individuals and business owners, and helping them with their legal problems of all different shapes and sizes. In fact, it's this variety that distinguishes me in this race. Now, some of this experience has been straightforward real estate, personal injury, and commercial disputes, but I've also done all types of complex cases. I've done complex pollution coverage, class actions, trade secrets, and regulatory cases. I've represented the University of Washington Medical Center and the Washington Legislature. And for the last 5 years, I've litigated a public records case involving 1.2 million documents and hundreds of pages of briefing and multiple court levels. Now, I mention this experience because this county is different. As one judge told me, 80% of cases involving the state of Washington are heard right here in Thurston County. Our judges are bombarded with all types of complex, difficult cases. And to be prepared, our judges need to have this wide variety of experience, not just experience in 1 or 2. Now, I'm also running because I love this community. I'm from here, I grew up here, I'm an Olympia High graduate, and I can think of no more honorable way to serve this community than as a Superior Court judge. Now, I believe I have the best experience, and the Thurston County attorneys agree. I won the bar poll of Thurston County attorneys by 2-to-1 margin over my opponent, and I am endorsed by the Thurston County Deputy Prosecutors, Sheriff John Snaza, and County Clerk Betty Gould. But more importantly, Position 4, this position has been held by 22 years by Judge Thomas McPhee, one of our most respected judges. Now, I'm honored that Judge McPhee has endorsed my campaign and called me the best choice for this position. I ask for your support.
Okay, thank you both. Erik, you'll get the first question. Maintaining a fair and impartial judiciary is a keystone in a democracy. Do you think maintaining judicial independence despite pressures from parties, political leaders, and private citizens is a problem? Why or why not? And I can read the question again if you'd like.
Well, that's a great question. You know, states have a variety of approaches in terms of electing judges, and some of the states have taken the position that electing judges does provide too much influence from political parties and so forth. And I don't know what the right answer is. I do know that judges have to be very, very vigilant in terms of maintaining their independence. People don't really know how to vote for judges. They like to put candidates into boxes, into political boxes or issues boxes. It is critical for our judiciary to be what I like to say, all things to everybody and nobody to anybody. And by that I mean that we really, when people come into court, they need to have the assurance that that judge does not have political favors to pay, and that they will have their position heard in a way that will give them confidence that the decision that comes out of them is not based upon pressures, but it's based on the law.
Thank you. Indu.
A fair and impartial judiciary is very important, and one of the reasons why I think that I would be the best candidate for this position is the fact that I have 5 years of experience being a fair and impartial decision maker. Having worked for all 3 branches of government, I have looked at law from all sides now, and I see where the differences are. The law and the facts come together at a certain point. And to be fair and impartial, you must make your decision where those two intersect. And the election actually is an interesting process, and it does expose you to many people, but I've been pleased to see that not only are there a few people that want to paint you in that box and have you identify yourself as partisan or have some sort of loyalty to one entity or another, there are many people that are well educated and really appreciate the ability to be neutral, the ability to find the middle and to stay in the middle. That is a talent, and it is one that I have developed over the last 5 years.
Thank you. And Indu, you'll get the next question. What would you say are the 2 most important criteria a voter needs to know about a candidate in order to make the right choice for Superior Court judge?
The 2 most important criteria are, number 1, experience, and I've spent some time talking about that, but number 2, integrity and character. You want judges that will be of the highest integrity and who will, as I just spoke about, make sure that their decisions are fair and impartial. I believe that I have shown my integrity in all of the aspects of my work for this community for the last 15 years. I believe that I have shown my integrity in my work for the community on community boards and in my church committees and work in the community, in that community of faith. Integrity is so critical in terms of that which we just discussed with respect to the fairness and the impartiality. I believe in justice tempered with mercy, and I also believe that a judicial officer must have the humility to listen to the individuals that come before them to make the right decisions.
Thank you. Erik.
Well, 2 most important criteria for voters is that what the question was, to the voters?
Yeah, well, what kind of criteria does the voter need to make a good decision?
Right. And it's hard to argue with integrity and experience. Obviously, those are 2 traits that are very critical for judges. I think it is easier for voters to understand differences of experience because experience is something that has more objective benchmarks. What I have done in my career versus my opponent, you can tell. You can go on the website, you can see the differences. In that respect, it's easier for voters, I think, to get a handle on that. I think the issue of whether integrity is something that the voter can really get from a campaign that's a difficult question. I certainly don't want to. I don't want to suggest that integrity is not critical for judges, because it absolutely is. I just question whether or not an elector is going to be able to understand whether someone does or doesn't have integrity. I think that's something that our friends and families can understand about us, and as opposed to the electorate. So that's kind of a tough one to ask of voters. But I'm not sure I have another one, because I think right now it is difficult for voters to understand how to vote for judges, and I think looking at experience is probably the best place for voters to turn to when they don't otherwise have a basis for making a decision.
And that is a great segue, because first of all, I have a tough time voting for judges because I'm not an attorney, and our next question is, how will your background affect the balance of experience and perspective of the Superior Court? So talk to us about your experience. Erik, you get this question.
Oh, well, there you go. Well, I think this is a great question because right now our bench is, diversity of experience on the bench is critical. Not every judge or even judge candidate or judge brings with them the entire basket of experiences that a judge needs to do their job. Because there's just too many. As I mentioned in my opening, our judges are bombarded with dozens and dozens and dozens of types of cases. And I think with that in mind, if you look at our current lineup of judges, you have judges that have experience in family and juvenile matters. You have judges that have experience in criminal matters, both on the defense side and the prosecution side. And you have judges that have experience in government work from the Attorney General's office. But you don't have a judge on the current bench that has my type of experience, which, as I mentioned, representing individuals, business owners in court doing civil matters in a wide variety of areas, both simple and complex. And that's what I bring to this court. I bring to this court, for 20 years, I've done, I can't count how many civil matters I've done in terms of different complex areas. And that's exactly what this bench needs.
Thank you. Indu, can you talk about your experience and background?
Certainly. More specifically than I did in my opening, let me say that I have served as a public defender in King County. That before my work in Thurston County, I've worked as an assistant attorney general for 8 years, both handling child welfare cases and then mental health cases, handling the involuntary commitment cases, and also representing the state hospitals, Child Study and Treatment Center, Eastern State Hospital in complex cases in federal court, and Western State Hospital. Those experiences led to my appointment at the legislature as a staff counsel, and my subject areas there were mental health, substance abuse, child welfare, juvenile justice, and public assistance. I have a broad experience. Even prior to law school, I taught school as a teacher, and that experience assists me in managing my courtroom now. Those classroom management techniques translate very well into courtroom management techniques. All of these things together bring a broadness and diversity of experiences that no one else on the court has. All 3 branches of government, teaching experience prior to law school, I bring broad and diverse experience to the bench.
Thank you. And so, Indu, you get the next question. Do you have any proposals for making court processes more efficient? As you know, civil cases often face long waits.
Civil cases often do face long waits, and I have not had the opportunity to do civil cases since my appointment as court commissioner. However, as a family and juvenile court commissioner, I have worked with my colleague and with the Board of Judges to put efficiencies in place. We've moved to electronic review, and that has put some efficiencies in place already. I look forward to doing more of that, and it's really incredible how much you can accomplish simply by making that one change of not pulling files and not looking at the paper and actually reviewing everything electronically. And I was one of the first judicial officers to do that. That is one change that I'm looking forward to taking to scale and addressing in all of our cases. In terms of other efficiencies, I really would have to take the time to look at the cases from a judicial perspective after having been away from the civil litigation for a while before I could identify efficiencies. But I am confident that I would be able to do so, given that I have been able to identify and implement efficiencies in the juvenile and family calendars that I hear now.
Thank you. Erik.
Well, the sluggishness of justice in the civil side is something that's not new. I mean, I have had the experience because for 20 years I've done civil cases, and I've sat there at the conference table with a client and explained to them, you know, you have a wrong, we can file a lawsuit, we can make this right, but it's going to take you 18 months. It's going to take you 24 months. And I've looked at the eyes of clients when they've been frustrated with that, and they say, why does it take this long? So I've had firsthand experience dealing with that. In terms of suggestions for it, well, the court's is moving towards electronic records, and that's going to be something that's going to help. But I think judges can have, and this is something, you know, having done this as long as I have, you know, you take little notes on your little mental notes on things that you might do differently if you were a judge. And there are some things that judges can do to move parties along. You know, some of the sluggishness is related to the resources of the court, and until those resources turn around, there's not much you can do about that. But some of the delay has to do with the parties, and those parties, you know, sometimes delay is a tactic, and that is something that I think a judge can have through management of their cases, and more active management of the attorneys can rein in a little bit. So that's just one suggestion I'd give.
Okay, next question, and Erik, you can start. To what extent do you believe that a judge should or should not defer to the actions of the legislature?
Wow, well that's a substantial question that has got a lot of moving parts to it.
You have 2 minutes.
I have 2 minutes, yes. Well, you know, the legislature makes the law. And for the most part, particularly at the trial court level, there's not a lot of second guessing whether that law is or isn't okay, but there is interpretation of the law. And there's a host of areas that a trial court judge would look to in order to try to understand how to apply a particular law in a particular instance. And most notably is legislative intent. And so in terms of deferring to the legislature, it happens all the time. It's your job to understand what the law is, and understand what the law is means deferring to the legislature. Now, there are those issues that come up that the legislature has gone outside the bounds of permissible legislation. And I think you can't confuse deference to the legislature to not doing your duty as a judicial officer to see a constitutional defect if there is one. And that's, you know, I've done constitutional cases. I've argued that statutes are not constitutional. I've argued that rules are not consistent with statutes that are not consistent with the Constitution. And I've argued in favor of statutes being constitutional, and my opposing party is arguing the opposite. So I know those issues and I know those arguments. As a judge, you just have to, you know, you have to do the best you can to understand, and when something is an orange, call it an orange, and when something is an apple and someone wants it to be called an orange, recognize it's an apple, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Indu.
Thank you. When I took the oath of commissioner, it's the same oath that, if the public will have me, I'll have the privilege of taking as a judge. I swore to uphold the constitutions of the state of Washington and the United States of America. I didn't make an oath to uphold the law for exactly this reason. You give deference to the legislature when the laws have been drafted appropriately and they protect the constitutional rights of our people. We have the responsibility to overturn those laws that are unconstitutional. So that I would be deferring to the legislature whenever the law that was drafted and put before me is appropriate and keeps in mind all of the rights of the people that it is intended to address. But if a law is constitutional, if it is unconstitutional, if it interferes with a person's rights, as under either the Washington State Constitution or the United States Constitution, then that would be the time when you wouldn't give deference to the legislature. I am uniquely positioned to know where those lines are because I have had the privilege of working for both the legislature and the judiciary. I'm uniquely privileged in having an inside look, if you will, into how the law is drafted and how those decisions are made and how things can actually come through and become law that have flaws to them. I'm uniquely positioned to be able to address those issues. But to answer the question specifically, when do you defer to the legislature? When they've done a really good job, and most of the time they do. But you always have to reserve room for the idea that they might have gone too far, and you won't defer to the legislature when what they've done is not constitutional.
Thank you. Indu, you get the next question. There are concerns that increased campaign expenditures in judicial races will eventually compromise the integrity of our judges. Do you agree that this is or could be a problem in our state? 2 minutes.
I do agree that it could become a problem at some point. I don't believe it is a problem at this point because of the tension between the rules for public disclosure and the judicial ethics code. We, as candidates, are not permitted to know who has contributed to our campaigns. So you're able to move forward, for the most part, without knowing who's supporting you, and so you are not affected by who's supporting you. Of course, because there's that tension with the PDC, you have to have a general idea of what types of people are supporting you, what types of entities are supporting you. So there's always a risk and a danger. I understand that in other states that it's much more open, and that judicial officers are aware of who is contributing to them, and that there have been problems. In this state, we haven't gone there yet, and I hope that we continue to have the strict rules that we have. I'm proud to say that I serve on the Judicial Ethics Committee now, and that we are very cautious in addressing these issues. The integrity of the court really is one of the most important aspects of a judicial officer. You must maintain your integrity, and therefore to not know who's supporting you is one way of making sure that you protect that.
Thank you. Erik?
I think I'd agree with my opponent. I think that so long as we elect judges in this state, we're going to have money in elections for judges in this state. And the PDC and the Code of Judicial Ethics do have restrictions on judicial candidates having close contact with who's giving money and who and where that money's coming from. In addition to that, the amounts that people can donate are rather limited. And you know, unlike I think other elected positions where you have your you talk openly about your positions on various issues, and people give you money with the expectation that you're going to vote in a particular way. I mean, that's sort of elected politics in a lot of the areas. My experience has been in this campaign that that hasn't happened at all. There has been no suggestion from anybody that, and rightfully so, that a judge is going to do anything once, in a particular way once they're on the bench, other than be a great judge and be conscientious. So only until we don't elect judges do I think there won't be money in races. But I would strenuously, notwithstanding the fact that, frankly, candidly, there's some frustration in not knowing your campaign finances as a candidate. But I do think that I would argue strongly against changing those rules, because it is nice not only for the candidate to not know those things, it's also nice for the public to know that the candidate doesn't know those things, so that if they do have a case in front of that judge some other time, they don't have to fear that some sort of campaign contribution might influence the decision.
Okay, we actually have time for one last question. So Erik, you can start. How do you define judicial activism? So, does judicial activism in the courts concern you?
Well, judicial activism is in the eyes of the beholder, I think. You know, to say people label judicial activists on a judge that does what they don't like oftentimes. But I don't know that judicial activism is something that is relevant much at all at the trial court level. Whether you are or not a judicial activist is meaningless, I think, when you're in the trial court. And trial court is there to take in evidence and to make decisions, apply the law to facts. When people think about the judicial activism, I think they really are thinking more in the highest courts, you know, the Supreme Court, whether the state or certainly the U.S. Supreme Court has been criticized depending on what side you're on for that type of thing. How do I define? I don't know that I have a definition for it, other than people believe that it's when you stray from precedent. And to the extent that the question's getting at that, let me just say that the precedent is critical for a trial court judge. You know, trial court judges follow the law. They're not necessarily changing any law. They are following the law. Of course, that takes interpretation, but again, much more of an issue, I think, when you go up the food chain to Court of Appeals and Supreme Courts.
Indu, judicial activism.
Thank you. I define judicial activism, or my understanding of the definition of judicial activism really comes from that perspective that it's a negative connotation. It's judges that are going beyond or outside the lines of what is truly the responsibility of the judiciary. When I was in school and when I taught school, I taught that the judicial branch of government determined cases and controversies. And that's all they did. They determined cases and controversies. Now, when you talk about judicial activism, you're talking about judges who are making the law from the bench. And I have to say that I think that there is a risk at all levels, even at the trial court level, of someone making the law right from the bench by going a little too far in the interpretation. And I have to agree that it's a negative thing for the judicial branch to step over that line and cross into what the legislature does. The judiciary is a special branch of government. We're not a representative branch of government. We're a branch of government that's there to protect, to make sure that the things that come before us are handled appropriately, to apply the law to the facts in front of us. Ironically, a judge is not there to judge. A judge is not there to change the law. A judge is there to apply the law. Judicial activism, from my perspective, is a negative thing. It's what's undermining the confidence in the judiciary. A judge should apply the law. A judge should be aware of where the lines are, and I am uniquely positioned to know where the lines are because I've had the opportunity to serve in all three branches of government, and I wouldn't be a judicial activist.
Thank you. And now you each have a minute closing statement, and Erik, we're going to start with you.
Well, I want to thank the League of Women Voters for having this forum. This is obviously a great opportunity for us to meet voters in a way that doesn't involve the doorbell. I want to go back to something that was raised earlier, and that is diversity of experience on our bench. Our bench needs diverse experience, and as I said earlier, this bench currently has several judges with deep backgrounds and experience in family and juvenile matters. It has judges with deep experience in criminal matters as well as governmental matters from the government side. The last judge to have my type of experience, the experience of an attorney representing people, representing business owners in court, doing all kinds of civil matters, the last judge to have that experience was Judge Tom McPhee, and he's leaving the bench. Now, voters have a horrible, difficult time in trying to decide how to vote for judges. But I have the confidence that if the voters do their homework and really dig into the differences between myself and my opponent, that they will join Judge Tom McPhee and scores of other judges, elected officials, and neighbors to support my candidacy. I'm Erik Price, and I ask for your vote.
Okay, Indu?
Thank you. 40% of the work of the court is family and juvenile work. 40% of the work of the court is criminal work. I have experience in both of those areas of law. I have experience in 80% of the work of the court. The remaining 20% of the work of the court is a variety of different civil matters. I have some experience with those areas as well as a lawyer. It's fair to say that I have experience in 85% or more of things that come before the Superior Court. At the trial court level, at the Superior Court level, we are judges of general jurisdiction. It is difficult for the public to determine who the next judicial officer should be. But I trust that when you do your homework, that you will see that I am the one that has made the transition to the bench. I have judicial experience. I am the one that has the most diverse and broad experience in many of the areas that come before the court, and I am the one who has proven that I can quickly learn those areas that I don't have any previous experience in. Before I was appointed as a commissioner, I had no experience with family law, but I have served with distinction for the last 5 years. I would be honored to have your vote.
Thank you. Thank you, Erik Price. Thank you, Indu Thomas. And thank you for joining the League of Women Voters of Thurston County today for the Judicial Forum, Superior Court Judge Position number 4. I would also like to thank TCTV for hosting us. And as someone who is not an attorney, I realize how difficult it is to vote for judges, so we really appreciate you joining us today so we can all make an informed decision. And remember, the Thurston County League of Women Voters would love to have you as a member, both men and women. Thank you again.